Chapter 1. The sun was setting over Venice, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Oliver stepped off the boat, his backpack slung over one shoulder and a sketchbook tucked under his arm. He took a deep breath, feeling the salty air fill his lungs. Venice was just as beautiful as he had imagined. Canals sparkling in the fading light, gondolas gliding silently through the water, and ancient buildings standing tall like guardians of the past. Oliver was a young artist from a small town, and this was his first time in Venice. He had saved money for months to make this trip. His dream was to paint something extraordinary, something that would capture the magic of this city. But more than that, he hoped to find inspiration, something that would make his art come alive. As he walked through the narrow streets, his eyes darted everywhere. He noticed the way the light reflected off the water, the way the shadows danced on the old stone walls, and the way the city seemed to hum with life. He couldn't wait to start sketching. Oliver found a small, cozy hotel near one of the quieter canals. The owner, an old man with a kind smile, welcomed him warmly. "Ah, an artist," the man said, noticing Oliver's sketchbook. "Venice is full of beauty. I hope you find what you're looking for." That night, Oliver sat by the window of his room, looking out at the moonlit canal. He opened his sketchbook and began to draw, but something felt missing. His sketches were good, but they didn't feel special. He sighed and closed the book, deciding to explore more the next day. Little did Oliver know, his life was about to change. The next day, he would see a woman on a bridge, a woman who would inspire him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. And soon, he would find a page from her journal, a page that would lead him on a journey through the heart of Venice. But for now, Oliver slept, dreaming of canals and colors, unaware of the adventure that awaited him. Chapter 2. The mysterious woman. The next morning, Oliver woke up early, eager to explore Venice. The city was already alive with the sounds of footsteps on cobblestones, the chatter of people, and the gentle splashing of water against the canals. He grabbed his sketchbook and a pencil, slipping them into his bag before heading out. Oliver wandered through the maze of narrow streets, letting his feet guide him. He crossed small bridges, passed by colorful buildings, and stopped to watch gondoliers skillfully navigate the canals. Everywhere he looked, there was something to draw: a flower pot on a windowsill, a cat sunbathing on a stone step, or the way the sunlight danced on the water. Finally, he found a quiet spot by a canal. He sat down on a bench, pulled out his sketchbook, and began to draw. The scene in front of him was perfect. A small bridge arched over the water, with a few boats tied to wooden posts. But as he sketched, his mind wandered. He still felt like something was missing from his art. Then he saw her. On the bridge, a woman sat alone, her legs dangling over the edge. She had a journal in her hands and was writing intently. Her dark hair fell over her shoulders, and the sunlight seemed to glow around her. Oliver couldn't look away. There was something about her, the way she seemed lost in her thoughts, the way her pen moved quickly across the page. She looked like a character from a story, and Oliver felt an urge to capture her in his sketchbook. He started to draw her, his pencil moving quickly. But as he worked, he noticed something else. The woman looked sad, as if she were carrying a heavy weight. Her eyes were focused on the page, but her expression was full of longing. Oliver wondered what she was writing about. When he finished the sketch, he decided to approach her. He wanted to talk to her, to ask her about her journal, to tell her how inspiring she was. But as he stood up and walked toward the bridge, the woman closed her journal and stood as well. She glanced around, her eyes scanning the crowd, and before Oliver could reach her, she turned and disappeared into the maze of streets. Oliver stood on the bridge, feeling a mix of disappointment and curiosity. Who was she? What was she writing about? And why did she look so sad? He didn't know it yet, but this mysterious woman would change his life. The next day, he would find a page from her journal floating in the canal, a page that would lead him on a journey to find her. But for now, Oliver returned to his hotel, his mind filled with questions, and his sketchbook filled with the image of the woman on the bridge. Chapter 3. The Journal Page. The morning after seeing the mysterious woman on the bridge, Oliver woke up early again. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Who was she? What was she writing in her journal? And why did she disappear so quickly? He felt a strange connection to her, even though they hadn't spoken a single word. Oliver decided to return to the same spot by the canal, hoping she might be there again. The city was quieter in the early hours, with only a few people walking the streets and the soft sound of water lapping against the stones. When he reached the bridge, he looked around, but the woman wasn't there. Disappointed, he sat down on the bench and opened his sketchbook to the drawing he had made of her the day before. As he stared at the sketch, something caught his eye. Floating in the canal, just a few feet away, was a piece of paper. It was wet and slightly crumpled, but he could see writing on it. Curious, Oliver reached out and carefully picked it up. The paper was a page from a journal. The ink had smudged in some places, but the words were still clear. Oliver read them slowly, his heart beating faster with each line. Venice is a city of secrets, the page began. Every canal holds a story. Every bridge hides a memory. I come here to write, to escape, to find myself. But sometimes I feel like the city is swallowing me whole. I wonder if anyone will ever understand the words I leave behind. The writing was poetic and full of emotion. Oliver could feel the writer's longing and loneliness in every word. He read the page again and again, feeling as though the words were speaking directly to him. At the bottom of the page, there was a name, Sophia. Oliver's mind raced. This had to be the woman from the bridge. Her journal page had somehow ended up in the canal, and now it was in his hands. He felt a surge of determination. He had to find her. He had to know more about her. He carefully folded the page and tucked it into his sketchbook. As he walked back to his hotel, his thoughts were filled with questions. Why had Sophia's journal page ended up in the water? Was she okay? And most importantly, how could he find her in a city as big as Venice? Little did Oliver know, this page was just the beginning. It would lead him on a journey through the streets of Venice, to cafes, bookstores, and art galleries, in search of the mysterious Sophia. And when they finally met, their connection would be deeper than either of them could have imagined. But for now, Oliver held on to the page, feeling as though he had found a piece of a puzzle he was determined to solve. Chapter 4. Searching the city with Sophia's journal page safely tucked into his sketchbook, Oliver set out to find her. Venice was a big city, full of winding streets and hidden corners, but Oliver was determined. He started his search near the bridge where he had first seen her, hoping she might return to the same spot. He asked the shopkeepers and gondoliers if they had seen a woman matching Sophia's description. "Dark hair, always writing in a journal," he said. But no one seemed to know who she was. Some people shook their heads, while others simply shrugged and went back to their work. Oliver didn't give up. He decided to visit places where someone like Sophia might go, cafes, bookstores, and art galleries. He thought about the words on her journal page. "I come here to write, to escape, to find myself." Maybe she spent her time in quiet, creative spaces, just like he did. His first stop was a small cafe tucked away in a quiet square. The smell of fresh coffee and pastries filled the air as Oliver stepped inside. He looked around, hoping to see Sophia sitting at one of the tables, writing in her journal. But she wasn't there. Disappointed, he ordered a coffee and sat by the window, watching people pass by. Next, he visited a bookstore with tall shelves filled with books in many languages. The owner, an elderly woman with glasses perched on her nose, greeted him warmly. "Are you looking for something specific?" she asked. "I'm looking for someone," Oliver replied. He described Sophia again, but the woman shook her head. "I'm sorry I haven't seen her," she said. Oliver thanked her and left, feeling a little discouraged. As the day went on, Oliver visited several art galleries, thinking Sophia might be drawn to places filled with creativity and beauty. In one gallery, he saw a painting that reminded him of her, a woman sitting by a canal, lost in thought. He stared at it for a long time, wondering if Sophia had ever stood in this same spot, looking at the same painting. By the end of the day, Oliver was tired. He had walked through countless streets, asked dozens of people, and visited so many places, but he still hadn't found Sophia. He sat on a bench by the canal, staring at the water. The journal page was still in his sketchbook, a reminder of why he was searching, Just as he was about to give up for the day, something caught his eye. Across the square, a woman with dark hair was walking into an art gallery. Oliver's heart skipped a beat. Could it be her? He stood up quickly, his sketchbook clutched in his hands, and hurried toward the gallery. As he stepped inside, he saw her. She was standing in front of a painting, her journal in her hands. Oliver's search was over. But what would happen when he finally spoke to her? Chapter 5. A lucky meeting. Oliver's heart raced as he stepped into the art gallery. The room was quiet, filled with the soft hum of classical music and the faint scent of paint and wood. His eyes immediately found her. She was standing in front of a large painting, her dark hair falling over her shoulders, just as he remembered. In her hands was the same journal she had been writing in on the bridge. For a moment, Oliver hesitated. What would he say to her? How could he explain that he had been searching for her all over Venice? But then he remembered the journal page, the words that had touched him so deeply. He took a deep breath and walked toward her. "Excuse me," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. Sophia turned around, her eyes wide with surprise. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Oliver noticed how her eyes seemed to hold 1,000 stories, just like the words in her journal. "Hi," Oliver said, smiling nervously. "I'm Oliver. I think this belongs to you." He pulled the folded journal page from his sketchbook and handed it to her. Sophia's eyes widened even more as she took the page. "Where did you find this?" she asked, her voice soft but full of curiosity. "It was floating in the canal," Oliver explained. "I found it yesterday, near the bridge where I saw you. I've been looking for you ever since." Sophia looked down at the page, her fingers tracing the smudged ink. "I can't believe you found this," she said quietly. "I thought it was gone forever." Oliver felt a rush of relief. She didn't seem upset or annoyed that he had been searching for her. In fact, she looked almost grateful. "I read it," Oliver admitted. "Your words are beautiful. They made me want to find you, to know more about you." Sophia smiled for the first time, and Oliver felt his heart skip a beat. "Thank you," she said. "I write to express what I can't say out loud. It's my way of understanding the world." They stood there for a moment, the silence between them comfortable and warm. Then Sophia gestured to the painting in front of them. "Do you like art?" she asked. "I'm an artist," Oliver said, holding up his sketchbook. "I came to Venice to find inspiration." Sophia's eyes lit up. "Maybe we're not so different," she said. "I came here to write, to find stories." They began to talk, their words flowing easily. Oliver told her about his journey to Venice, his love for painting, and how he had been searching for something special to capture in his art. Sophia shared her passion for writing, how she found beauty in the small details of life, and how Venice had become her sanctuary. As they talked, Oliver felt a connection growing between them. It was as if they had known each other for years, not just minutes. They decided to leave the gallery and walk through the city together, sharing stories and laughter as they explored the streets of Venice. By the end of the day, Oliver knew one thing for certain. Meeting Sophia was the inspiration he had been searching for all along. Chapter 6. Exploring Venice together. The days that followed Oliver and Sophia's meeting were filled with discovery and joy. Venice, already a magical city, seemed even more beautiful when they explored it together. They became inseparable, spending hours wandering through the streets, sharing their love for art and storytelling. Their first adventure took them to St. Mark's Square, the heart of Venice. The square was bustling with people, pigeons fluttering around, and the sound of music from nearby cafes filling the air. Oliver and Sophia sat on the steps of St. Mark's Basilica, watching the world go by. "This place feels alive," Sophia said, her journal open on her lap. "It's like every stone has a story to tell." Oliver nodded, sketching the scene in front of him. "That's what I love about Venice," he said. "It's not just a city, it's a living, breathing work of art." As they talked, Sophia began to write, her pen moving quickly across the page. Oliver glanced over and saw her capturing the energy of the square in words. He smiled, feeling inspired by her passion. Next, they visited the Rialto Bridge, one of the most famous landmarks in Venice. They stood at the top of the bridge, looking out over the Grand Canal. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and gondolas drifted lazily below. "It's amazing how something so simple, a bridge, can become a symbol of a city," Oliver said, his sketchbook in hand. "It's not just a bridge," Sophia replied. "It's a connection. It brings people together, just like stories do." Oliver looked at her, struck by her words. He realized that Sophia had a way of seeing the world that was both poetic and profound. He began to sketch the bridge, but his eyes kept drifting back to her. As the days went on, they explored more of Venice. They visited small hidden cafes where they drank espresso and shared pastries. They wandered through quiet neighborhoods where laundry hung from windows and cats lounged in the sun. They even took a gondola ride at sunset, the city bathed in golden light. One evening, they found themselves in a small park by the water. The sky was painted in shades of pink and purple, and the air was filled with the sound of waves gently lapping against the stones. Oliver sat on a bench, sketching the view, while Sophia sat beside him, writing in her journal. "Do you ever feel like Venice is speaking to you?" Sophia asked suddenly, looking up from her journal. Oliver thought for a moment. "Yes," he said. "It's like the city is alive, and it's telling us its secrets." Sophia smiled. That's exactly how I feel. Maybe that's why we found each other here. Venice brought us together. Oliver looked at her, feeling a warmth in his chest. He realized that Sophia had become more than just a friend. She was his muse, his inspiration, and he hoped that, in some way, he had become the same for her. As the sun set and the stars began to appear, Oliver and Sophia sat in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. They didn't need words to understand each other. Venice had given them a connection that went beyond language, a bond that grew stronger with each passing day. Chapter 7. A growing connection. As the days turned into weeks, Oliver and Sophia's bond grew stronger. What had started as a chance meeting on a bridge had blossomed into a deep and meaningful friendship. They spent almost every moment together, exploring Venice, creating art, and sharing their dreams. One afternoon, they found themselves in a small, sunlit square away from the busy tourist areas. The square was quiet, with only the sound of a fountain bubbling in the center. Oliver set up his easel and began to paint, while Sophia sat on a nearby bench, writing in her journal. "What are you working on?" Sophia asked, glancing up from her writing. Oliver smiled. "I'm trying to capture the light," he said. "The way it falls on the buildings and the water. It's like magic." Sophia watched him for a moment, her eyes following the movement of his brush. "You're really talented," she said softly. Oliver felt his cheeks grow warm. "Thank you," he said. "But your writing, it's like nothing I've ever read. It's so full of emotion and beauty." Sophia looked down at her journal, a small smile playing on her lips. "Writing is how I make sense of the world," she said. "It's my way of understanding my feelings and my place in everything." Oliver nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "Art is the same for me," he said. "It's like when I paint, I can express things I can't put into words." They sat in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. The square was peaceful, and the warm sunlight made everything feel soft and golden. Oliver continued to paint, but his mind kept drifting back to Sophia. He realized how much she had come to mean to him in such a short time. Later that evening, they walked along the canal as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air was cool, and the city was quiet, as if it were holding its breath. "Do you ever feel like Venice is a dream?" Sophia asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Oliver looked at her, surprised by the question. "Sometimes," he said. "It's so beautiful it doesn't feel real." Sophia nodded. "I feel the same way, and being here with you, it makes it even more special." Oliver's heart skipped a beat. He wanted to tell her how he felt, how much she had come to mean to him, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he reached out and gently took her hand. Sophia looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise, but she didn't pull away. They walked hand in hand along the canal, the city around them glowing in the twilight. That night, as Oliver lay in bed, he thought about Sophia. He realized that she had become more than just a friend. She was his muse, his inspiration, and someone he couldn't imagine being without. The next day, they would share a special moment by the canal, one that would bring them even closer. But for now, Oliver fell asleep with a smile on his face, dreaming of Venice and the woman who had captured his heart. Chapter 8. A special moment. The evening was perfect. The sky was a deep shade of blue, dotted with the first stars of the night, and the canals of Venice shimmered under the soft glow of street lights. Oliver and Sophia sat by the water, their feet dangling over the edge of a quiet canal. The city was calm, the usual hustle and bustle replaced by a peaceful stillness. Oliver had brought his sketchbook, and Sophia had her journal. They had spent the day exploring hidden corners of Venice, and now, as the night settled in, they found themselves in this quiet spot, away from the crowds. For a while they sat in comfortable silence, watching the water ripple gently below. Then Oliver turned to Sophia, his heart pounding. He had been thinking about this moment all day. "Sophia," he began, his voice soft but steady, "I made something for you." He opened his sketchbook and carefully tore out a page. On it was a beautiful painting of Sophia, sitting on the bridge where he had first seen her. The details were perfect. The way her hair fell over her shoulders, the thoughtful expression on her face, the journal in her hands. Sophia's eyes widened as she took the painting. "Oliver, this is incredible," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Oliver replied, smiling. "I just wanted you to know how much you've inspired me. Meeting you, it's changed everything for me." Sophia looked at him, her eyes shining. "You've changed everything for me too," she said. "Before I met you, I felt like I was lost. But now, I feel like I found something I didn't even know I was looking for." She opened her journal and flipped to a page near the end. "I wrote something for you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Can I read it to you?" Oliver nodded, his heart swelling with emotion. Sophia began to read, her voice soft but clear. "In the streets of Venice, I found more than just a city. I found a connection, a spark that lit up the shadows in my heart. You showed me that art isn't just about capturing beauty, it's about sharing it, creating it together. And in you, I found a kindred spirit, someone who sees the world the way I do." When she finished, there were tears in her eyes. Oliver reached out and gently wiped them away, his own eyes misty. "Sophia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you've become so important to me. I don't want this journey to end." Sophia smiled through her tears. It doesn't have to, she said. Venice brought us together, but it's our connection that will keep us here. We can create our own story, one that's as beautiful as this city. They sat there for a long time, talking and laughing, their hearts full. The night wrapped around them like a blanket, and the city seemed to hum with approval, as if it knew it had played a part in bringing them together. As they walked back to their hotel, hand in hand, Oliver knew that this was just the beginning. Venice had given them a gift, a connection that would last a lifetime. Chapter 9. A New Beginning. The morning sun rose over Venice, casting a golden glow across the canals and waking the city with its gentle warmth. Oliver and Sophia stood on a small balcony overlooking the water, sipping coffee and watching the gondolas glide by. The events of the previous night still lingered in their minds, filling the air with a sense of quiet joy and possibility. "What do you think the future holds for us?" Sophia asked, breaking the comfortable silence. She leaned against the railing, her journal tucked under her arm. Oliver smiled, looking out at the city he had come to love so much. "I think the future is whatever we make it," he said. "And I know I want to make it here, with you." Sophia turned to him, her eyes sparkling. "I feel the same way," she said. "Venice feels like home now, not just because of the city, but because of you." They decided that day to stay in Venice. Oliver found a small studio where he could paint, and Sophia rented a cozy apartment with a view of the canals. They spent their days exploring the city, creating art, and sharing their dreams. Oliver's paintings began to sell in local galleries, and Sophia's writing gained recognition, with her stories about Venice touching the hearts of readers. One evening, as the sun set over the Grand Canal, they returned to the bridge where they had first met. The city was bathed in a warm, golden light, and the water reflected the colors of the sky like a painting. "It feels like everything started here," Oliver said, looking at Sophia. "This bridge, this city, it brought us together." Sophia nodded, her journal in her hands. "And now it's a part of our story," she said. "A story we'll keep writing together." They sat on the bridge, just as they had on that first day, but this time there was no mystery, no distance between them. They were two artists, two dreamers, who had found each other in the most magical of cities. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, Oliver took Sophia's hand. "I'm so grateful for this journey," he said. "For Venice, for art, and for you." Sophia smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Me too," she said, "and I can't wait to see where our story goes next." The city around them seemed to hum with life, as if it were celebrating their love and their dreams. Venice had given them a gift, a connection that would last a lifetime. And as they walked hand in hand through the streets, they knew that their story was just beginning.